I know there are many people out there that love real instruments or recorded instruments above anything else and wouldn't touch synths with a 10-foot pole. All they imagine synthesizers can do are those cold, horrible, hellish sounds, those beep boop sounds from old sci-fi shows. Cold and detached, not really human or realistic. However, if you've ever watched Blade Runner or you've jammed out to something like Churches, you know that they can be the complete opposite of that. Synths can be incredibly expressive and interesting and feel very alive and human, and the secret sauce for that is actually deceptively simple. So let me share with you today on how to take your synths to the next level, and also share a library that I think does this pretty well. Hey, my name is Steve and welcome back to Command-Shift-New. So, the answer to the secret sauce question for synthesizers? It's just effects. I know, deceptively simple and probably kind of anticlimactic at this point. You're probably thinking you've wasted a click, but there is a reason it's so simple and so powerful. I'm going to walk you through some of those reasonings and kind of provide a few examples, and also take a look at a library that really pushes this to the next level. It's a library called Vessels by Noon Instruments, and I'll share what that one does at the end as well. So let's dive in. So why are effects so important? It's actually quite simple and straightforward. While the oscillator and envelope and all those sorts of things help shape and create the sound, effects give it space and depth. Without effects, you lack that sense of third dimension, that level of space and detail. Synthesis does a really good job at obviously creating a sound out of nothing with just oscillators. If you don't have a full string section, for example, you could create a synthesizer that sounds a little bit like strings. But unless you've got your ear pressed against every single instrument in the orchestra, that string section would have had some element of space to it. Even if it's just to put it into a realistic space or a space that you would expect it to be recorded in, that's what makes it feel a little more human and alive. And it's a lot of different effects in a lot of different situations. If you're listening to those strings in a big cathedral, then you'd expect big reverbs. In a big cave, you might expect some echoes. Effects put synthesizers in real, tangible spaces and give it a sense of humanism that you probably felt it was lacking. Not just this, but it can add textures and new sounds to the instrument. Things like distortion and chorus can add a different kind of layer and sound to the instrument. So it can really transform the sound and transform the space in the third dimension. Check out this simple demo, for example, a very simple Logic synthesizer, then paired with a bunch of delicious effects. Of course, some of these synthesizers, they actually have all this built in, which kind of underlines just how important effects are in the sound design process for synths. Classic synths, cinematic film scores, of course, were recorded often on real analog hardware that had effects built into the synthesizer, or off to outboard gear as well to add that extra sense of space and grandness, if you like. Like, check out this simple patch on the Artura Polybrute that I have here in the studio, and what happens when we add all these effects to it. This travels through to software synths as well. I mean, not all synthesizers are just dry sounds, they also have built-in effects that you can use as part of the sound design process. So effects are really part of the process of your sound design, and I think people do tend to forget that. It's an incredibly important step. Sometimes I think that we actually get so wrapped up in all the different controls that are available on a synthesizer to control the oscillator and the envelope and all this sort of stuff that we forget about what effects can really do to the sound. Now, a library that I think kind of inspires this thinking is Vessels by Noon Instruments. I've been using this library for a little while now since they sent it to me, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it obviously gives me a fantastic library and lots of different sounds. They've got so many more sounds in this library than they even had from their first instrument, Tosca. And I really enjoyed Tosca, and I've definitely enjoyed Vessels as well. I think the two of them complement each other a little bit as well, because they have different sounds that the other one was missing, for example. And built into the library, although it's samples of a synthesizer sounds, there are more effects that you can put on. There are pulses, there are patterns, there are all sorts of things that you can do to tweak and tailor the sound further, which again underlines this idea that effects are a huge part of the sound design process. But the second reason that I love it is actually giving me a little bit of inspiration again. It's a good reminder of what is possible with sound design. And that's because they've taken synth patches, of course, but they've actually affected them even further through a process that we often call worldizing. This is where you might take a speaker, set it up in a room, play it back in that big room that might have lots of reverbs or echoes, and you record with a microphone what comes out in that room. But they've gone so much further. They've recorded it through a snare drum sound, or they've put contact mics onto metal sheets and recorded the result. So it really has some cool sounds to offer, but also a cool lesson to learn, which is to push yourself when experimenting. Loads of effects and loads of techniques for recording and worldizing are at your fingertips with just a few tools. Stock plugins, cheap contact microphones. I mean, you can get one that contacts onto metal sheets for like $8 online. It can be really accessible to start experimenting with this, and it will push your sound design so much further into something that is much more musical and less beep boopy that you might have thought synths were before. So I hope from this video what you're taking away is inspiration. Inspiration to try more of this in your sound design process. There's a whole world of synthesizing sounds out there for you to experiment with, initially through patches and then designing your own. If you've been away from synths or you didn't quite like the sound of them, I encourage you, I hope, to explore this a little bit further. It might just be the missing piece to your production. At the very least, broaden your horizons on what's possible in your music. As a working composer, being more fluent with more tools and more skilled up is going to really help you in that area. So if you'd like to check out Vessels, I'll leave a link below. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming along on this journey for me. If you liked this video, of course you can like, you can subscribe for more, but otherwise I'll catch you in the next one.